Hello, I'm Yoshi Bauer. Welcome to My Special Needs Connection and our continuing series of informational webinars. As a parent of children with special needs and a special needs advocate, I understand the challenges of connecting parents with the resources and information of professional services available in our community. This website is a culmination of a desire to provide parents with that access in one convenient location. We're excited that you have joined our positive, supportive, and rapidly expanding community, where we come alongside you to provide you with the support and resources you need. Please enjoy the webinar.
All right, my name is Susan Berkowitz, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how to build use of augmentative communication in your non-speaking, nonverbal child. Just to let you know who I am, I have been a speech-language pathologist for 40 years. I have worked almost all of that time with kids who don't speak and need AAC. I've worked for 45 years with kids with nonverbal autism, and I've worked as a clinician, as a researcher, as a trainer, so all sorts of different roles. And I feel that this body of experience has really taught me a lot. I've changed over the years as the research has changed and changed what we know. But what I want to tell you today are 3 easy main steps to beginning to teach kids to use augmentative communication. And those 3 steps are modeling, otherwise known as aided language stimulation or aided input, using core words, and those are the key words that are the most important words in any language, and moving on, keep moving. People tend to get kids to start naming things or requesting things, and they can say, I want X, and then we sort of stop. And because we need to keep building language in these kids just like we would with any typical neurotypical speaking child. The process is the same. Language is language. We still just need to build that language out. So the first step, as I said, is called aided language stimulation, and that is where we model using picture-based communication to the child. One of the things that we know about language development is that kids learn from models. If you are teaching your neurotypical child to talk, you don't do anything special for the most part. You just talk and you're giving him that language input. You're stimulating his language development. And it's in the same mode of communication that he's going to be using. But for our kids who use picture-based communication or need picture-based communication, there are no models in their environment of this language being used. So how do we expect them to know what it is we want them to do with these pictures? Learning picture-based communication is very much like learning a second language. You need to be immersed in it. You know, if you took a foreign language in high school or college and you've been away from it for a while, you probably don't remember very much of it. You're not in the environment. You don't have people using the language with you, showing you, demonstrating, helping you practice hearing it and using it. And the same goes for picture-based communication. So we really need to do that immersion. And that happens by people using pictures when they're speaking with a child, also to say, pick out the keywords. And this sounds daunting when I say, you're going to be modeling all the time. I get the deer in the headlights look from parents, from teachers, even from other speech pathologists sometimes. And it sounds like a lot. But using aided language stimulation really isn't that difficult. It just takes a little practice. And I always tell parents to start with just one activity. Pick an activity that you know the child is interested in or engaged in, or something that happens every day, giving you a lot of opportunities to practice it. And then you're going to think about the words that get used in that activity. And I'm going to come back to that once we talk about core words. You decide what words you need to model or target in that activity, And as you're speaking to the student or the child, you are going to pick out those keywords, those core words on the device or on the pages and model for the child. Once you're comfortable with one activity and you feel like you know what you're doing, move on to another one. And so gradually you build in one activity at a time, very thoughtfully, very mindfully, and as you get more comfortable, it will be easier to keep adding more activities. You don't have to do it all at once. That would scare any of us. But so let me come back to core words. Core words are the most important words that we use. They're reusable words, words with multiple meanings often, and words that make up about 80% of what we say. For the average toddler, so your average 3-year-old, say, and they know a lot of words, but they only use 25 words for 96% of what they say. So that's not very many words for a lot of communicating. There are no nouns. There are verbs, pronouns, adjectives, prepositions. Up, down, in, want, give, have, I, me, you, mine, do, not, all done. And when you build in those 25 core words, you have a lot of 2-word combinations that can convey a lot of meaning. Want that, not that, you do, me do, I have, it in, it on, it down. Lots and lots of 2-word combinations that you can get a lot of good message meaning from. And so when we look at core words, we think about those words, as I said, that get used the most. Your average adult uses between 200 and 500 words for 80% of what we say. That's not very many words, considering the thousands and tens of thousands of words that your average adult knows. But if you take any sentence and write it down, and you add up the core words, toss out the others, you will discover about 80% of the words in that sentence are core words. They're words that are reusable, words that have multiple meanings, and we have a lot of those in the English language. Go can mean I want to go someplace, I went someplace. Go away and leave me alone. Turn it on and make it go. I have to go to the potty. Any of those will get you what you want just with a single word in lots of different circumstances. So when you think about the routines that you do with your child all the time, those are great places for demonstrating and modeling core words. Routines happen often. They happen in a familiar way. There is a sequence that doesn't vary. There is language that pretty much doesn't vary. And so over time, you are constantly building in the language in a context. And the context is important. Words don't do a lot outside of a context. And so we need to teach in context, particularly since a lot of our kids don't generalize well. So that teaching in context really helps the generalization. We need to make sure that the AAC system, whatever it is, whether it's a board or a book or a device or an iPad, is available all the time. If we put it away, and I've walked into classrooms and homes where they're up on top of a shelf or a file cabinet or inside a desk or any place but accessible. But what happens when we pull the system out only when it's time for a specific activity, and this happens a lot in schools and sometimes in homes, what we're teaching the child is that this equals work. And I can pretty much always tell when this has happened when I go see a child and they're pushing the device away or pushing the book away. They don't want to have anything to do with it because it means work. It tells them that communication is only important when we do these specific activities. And we don't want children to get that. We want them to get communication is powerful. We want them to understand that power over your environment, over the people in your environment, over what happens to you and what you do, comes about with communication. So we want it to be real communication, not just point to the dog or where is the boy in the green shirt or what color is that. We want it to be genuine purposes for communicating, not testing. And so, again, that comes into context and into the activity where you're looking at something that the child likes to do. We are often told to downplay certain obsessions or strong interests that our kids have, that they shouldn't be talking about Thomas the Train 24/7. Though Thomas, I may be dating myself. But we want to use that. We want them to communicate about what they want to talk about. And so let's bring out Thomas or Disney princesses or whatever and use them as a springboard for communicating. One of the activities I have done with all sorts of people, children, adults, all ages, all types of disabilities, is bubbles. Somehow bubbles is a universal motivator, and I have gone through gallons of bubbles in my 40 years as a speech pathologist. And it's very handy, and it's a good one to show you. So, I can have a communication board that has core words, but also has the important words for blowing bubbles. Or I can have my communication device, and I can go to, iPads do not like upside down. I can go to activities and choose bubbles, and now I have the vocabulary, very simple, basic vocabulary that I can use for that activity. So what if I blow bubbles and then I say, blow. Blow. Let's blow bubbles. Pop. 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 Can you catch it? And I'm going to model. And then I'm going to wait. Do we want more? Should I blow more? Blow more? All right. And then I'll blow bubbles. Pop. 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 Catch. Catch that one. I can spend an hour with bubbles. And frequently, in that hour, I can get from blow to blow more to blow again. I want more. Again, this is a very simple layout, and I would probably have more words on there. But go. Want more. Want more. Blow. Blow. Oops. Again. And so with just this one page of core words and the important words for the activity, I could do a whole lot of communicating. And if bubbles is something that this child likes, and we're going to do it every day, now I've got that many more opportunities to model those same words in an activity that he enjoys and is having a fun time with, and it's real communication. I'll start to build in some expectant pauses. Look, raise your eyebrows, shrug, and if you don't get a response, okay, then model again. And when you do get a response, you're going to reinforce that with, yes, we're going to blow more bubbles. Don't say, good job. You want specific feedback. You said you want more bubbles, here come more bubbles. If the child reaches out for the system and accidentally hits the wrong button, you can verify. Puzzle? You want puzzle or do you want more bubbles? Puzzle or bubbles? Make a choice. If it turns out that he made a mistake and then he tries to reach for bubble, then you can scaffold and you can support him. But always respond to a communicative attempt. Always ascribe meaning to what the child does. If the child isn't communicating when he starts and tries and you know he's doing something but you're not quite sure what, see if you can figure it out from the context, and as a parent you probably can, and then ascribe that meaning. Give it words. Oh, you want peanut butter. Okay, let's get peanut butter. If he protests, peanut butter wasn't in. But you've given him a way to see how what he does becomes meaning and how he can change that meaning. And so we constantly are responding, ascribing meaning, scaffolding, modeling, and helping our students or children to develop those language skills and those communication skills. When we model, we always model one step above or beyond where the child currently is. If he's not using symbols at all, then we're going to model single words, single symbols. If he's starting to use some single words, then we're going to start modeling two-word phrases. Want that, put that in there. We get to two-word phrases, then we're going to start building in three-word phrases. So you're always going to model just one step above where the child is. And you're going to keep modeling. And when you first start using aided language stimulation, it's strictly input. We don't expect the child to use the symbols right away. If you think about your average neurotypical baby, in the first 18 months of their life, assuming they hear people talking 8 hours a day, that's more than 4,300 hours of listening to people talk before children start talking. If you have a nonverbal child who's getting speech therapy twice a week, and that's the only place they get the modeling, it's going to take 84 years for him to get as much language input with pictures as the neurotypical child did at 18 months. So we really need for this modeling to happen. The aided input is crucial. It's a step we knew about, came up in the literature in the late 1980s, but it just didn't grab hold. Some people were doing it, most people weren't, kind of got lost in the shuffle, and augmentative communication is a relatively young field. When I first became a speech pathologist, I wrote a thesis back in the mid-70s about teaching kids with autism to use signs. There were no pictures in the 70s. We had no communication symbols whatsoever. Bliss symbols, but outside of Canada, not a lot of people use those. And we discovered that teaching signs was working with these kids. The whole idea was so novel that the first half of my thesis, they made me prove that sign language was a real language. And so we have come a long way. But it's taken time. It's taken time for researchers to get out there and write papers and clinicians to gain more experience. We've learned a lot about the myths and misconceptions about augmentative communication in those years. And finally, we know that we need to do this modeling. We need to do this aided input. The next thing, again, I started talking about core words. Think about verbs, pronouns, adjectives, prepositions. In early core words, there are no nouns. Now, you get some core nouns later, once you've got hundreds of words. But initially, you're talking about almost anything except nouns. There's a reason for this. Labels don't carry a lot of meaning in communication. The example I always use is if I say apple, you might assume that I want an apple. Might be in the kitchen or the dining room. I might be looking or reaching or standing near the fruit, and you can assume that I want an apple. But what if I don't have those context cues and I say apple? Do I want an apple? Do I not want an apple? Did my apple fall on the floor? Did somebody take my apple? Is the apple bad? Do I not ever want to see another apple again? You don't know if all I've got is that one word. But if I can add in no apple, bad apple, apple down, gone, no more, now I've got a lot of meaning to that message. So those are one example. There are innumerable examples. Let's go back to routines. Think about the prompts that you give your child when they're washing their hands. On, off, hot, cold, up, down, more. Not a lot of fringe words. Soap, water, on, turn off. Again, lots of core words. Research have found that it takes 200 opportunities per day for a child to learn to use their communication system effectively. That sounds like a lot. And people, again, get that deer in the headlights look, 200 a day. But if you think about all the opportunities within a day for greeting and requesting and protesting and accepting, all of those other functions of communication, it's really pretty easy to get those 200 opportunities a day in. I can take a look at all of the routines that happen within the child's day, from washing up, getting dressed, eating breakfast, packing the backpack, getting off to school. Already, I've had dozens and dozens of opportunities to model using the system, to have the child use the system. Again, with those core words: dressing, washing, brushing, eating, in, on, up, down, more, all done, lots and lots of times. And so within each of those interactions, I'm starting to build that 200 opportunities a day, probably before my kid ever leaves the house. In school, again, teachers look at me and say, God, that's an awful lot. It might be an awful lot in a general ed classroom that's above third grade, where there's not a lot of time for the kids to talk and the teacher's doing most of the talking. Absolutely. But it's not impossible. And in almost any other classroom environment, it's very possible. Again, then you've got after school and the evening routines, and you've got another bank of time for all of those opportunities. And so those are important. Keep them in mind. Plan it out. Look at my notes. I start talking and then I lose all train of thought. I could talk about this for hours. So there are a couple of ways. The last step is building language and bringing out those 2-word phrases, 3-word phrases, complete sentences, using adjectives to describe things. We want to keep doing that, and we do it the same way that we do it for all of our other kids, except that we're going to model using the alternative communication system, and they're going to respond using the alternative communication system instead of speech. But teaching language is teaching language, and we do it the same way. When I talk to other speech pathologists who don't have a lot of experience with augmentative communication, they breathe a sigh of relief when I say, you know what you're doing for your other kids who are at this stage of language development? That's all you're going to do. You know what language development is. As a parent, if you've had other kids, observed other kids, you can see how language develops, how you step in, and when the child says something and the grammar is not quite right, you rephrase it. We call that recasting in speech therapy. When it's not clear, you give them some scaffolding, some support to figure out, negotiate what the meaning is. If they don't know what to say, you model. This is the same kind of language development you do with any kid, but now you're going to use the communication system as the mode of expression and as your mode of input. There are lots and lots of ways to motivate kids to expand their language and to talk more. We talked a little bit about motivation. I have a resource that I made for a specific child who loves trains. Loves trains, talks about trains, everything has to be about trains. And we get a lot of those. You can take symbols and put them on the trains and rearrange the trains to make sentences. You can run a single train along and expand it out, add an adjective to it. Lots of ways that you can incorporate what the child's engaging interest is. Another way that works pretty well for building language is using apps. A lot of our kids are very, very happy with technology. Give them an app and they can go on forever. I actually, when I do augmentative communication assessments, I have at least 2 iPads, and one of them has an AAC app on it, and the other one will have a play app on it. And there's a lot of good opportunities for building language with apps. The Tokaboka company, and they're not paying me for this plug, but they have fabulous interactive apps. I once spent 45 minutes having a tea party with a little girl with Toka Tea Party, and I had the app, and I had the AAC system, and she told me which kind of food she wanted, what color plate she wanted. Uh-oh, something spilled, we need to clean it up, get a napkin. We interacted and talked, and at the beginning, she wasn't using the pictures at all. She hadn't had much experience with them. She didn't know a lot about it. But she watched me, she listened, she picked it up, and by the end of that 45 minutes, she was communicating to me. Single words predominantly, but that was a giant step for her. Bomba Burger is another app. I have a young man, actually not that young, he's in his 30s, young to me, with autism, and he can sit 4 hours with me and play with this burger joint app, which has all sorts of silly things you can put on your hamburgers and shows you that you're eating. You hit your hamburger and it takes bites, and we could do that over and over and over again, and he never tires of it. And I build the language every time I see him. We're taking it one step further. So use the technology. Use the thing that the child likes. Another way to build language that's key, it's really crucial for every kid, is reading to them. Reading books aloud to them builds language skills. Does it for neurotypical kids, does it for kids with any kind of language disorder you can think of. And there are specific strategies and ideas that you can use when you're reading to make a good read aloud session that builds the language skills for your child. You can talk about the book before you read it. You can hold it up. You can look at the pictures. You can do what we call a picture walk through the book. This book is called A Trip to the Zoo. What do you think we're going to find in our trip to the zoo? What's going to be in the book? Flip through the page. Oh, what is that? Wait a minute. You need to find, I got rid of my app. Let's find where are the, where are the animals? So we're going to go home. We're going to find things. We're going to find animals. And we've got pets. We've got general animals. We might, on some pages, some pages will have zoo animals, ocean animals. It depends on how robust your system is and how many pictures you have in it and how many folders, what the child can do. But we're going to say, okay, you think we'll see an octopus at the zoo? No, probably not. What do you think we will see at the zoo? And then before the activity, you might say, what about describing an animal? What kind of animals do you think you're going to see? What are they going to look like? So you might start by describing something about the child or a toy or anything you've got in the environment. It's blue, it's big, it's soft, it's fuzzy. Now as we read the book, let's listen to the descriptions of these animals and see if you can tell me. So I'm going to read the book, and we're going to point out the animals, and we're going to point out the words the author uses to describe the animals. And then, after we're done reading, we're going to say, some of the animals had stripes. What about the zebra? Yes, he had stripes. Is there another animal we saw that had stripes? You're right, tiger has stripes. And we might venture beyond that and go into compare and contrast. Zebras and tigers both have stripes. Are they the same? Well, the stripes are the same, but other things are different. And again, you've got lots and lots of ways to build language. The next time you read the book, you might talk about sequence. And so before you read the book, you talk about the sequence of something, again, that's a familiar routine, like washing your hands, turn on the water, put on the soap, lather, rinse, dry. Those are the steps. What about the meals you eat in a day? Much easier sequence. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. That's the order that they come in. All right, so what order did they go to the animals in the zoo? Well, first they saw the elephants. What came next? Next came the zebra. What came next? What was last? What did they do at the end? Sequencing skills, retelling skills, story elements. Who's the character? Where did it happen? None of these skills are beyond the possibilities. We've gotten very, very serious in recent years about presuming competence. And that's how our kids are going to learn. Far, far too often, in the bad old days, we limited what we exposed a child to, what we tried to teach these children based on what we thought their limitations were. And we probably did irreparable harm to way, way too many individuals. We're getting more comfortable with the idea of presuming the potential for competence. It's the least dangerous assumption. If you assume the child can do something and you try to teach him that, he's miles ahead if he can learn it. And if he can't, you haven't lost anything. You've given him the opportunity. You've given him the input. You've tried lots of different things. If we presume that he can't do it, and so we don't teach him, we never know if he could have learned. And far too often, that is the case. One of the first evaluations I did at the San Diego Assistive Technology Center here in San Diego was for a young man who was 19. He had severe cerebral palsy, severe spasticity. He could move his head and he could blink his eyes. In school, they didn't think he could do anything. They didn't have a way to communicate with him. So they literally sat him in the back of the class from kindergarten through the age of 16 when his parents said, enough with this, and pulled him out of school. When we evaluated him and saw what he could do, we got him a dynamic display speech generating device. And when we set it up on his wheelchair when it arrived, he went straight to the keyboard and he typed, "Thank you so much. Now I have a voice like everyone else." Nobody ever taught this kid to read. Nobody sat down with him and gave him direct instruction. He picked it up sitting in the back of the classroom. And he finally had the opportunity to show us that he could communicate and he could be competent. Those are the opportunities we don't want to miss. And it's not that difficult to get started. What we're missing usually is parents having the access to what they need to learn and what they need to do. They don't always get training. Even the school staff don't always get training. But when they do, I find more often than not the parents don't get invited. And that's something that we need to change. I feel strongly enough about this that I actually just published a book called Make the Connection. And it's called Make the Connection. It's got a long subtitle, A Practical Guide to Parents and Practitioners for Teaching the Nonverbal Child to Communicate with AAC. And I wrote the book because both parents and speech pathologists alike were telling me that they needed a roadmap. They needed to know what to do and how to do it. Speech pathologists are busy, their lives are hectic. Reading another textbook to figure out what to do was just not going to happen. Parents are frustrated. Maybe the school has given them an iPad or a device and said, here, take it, enjoy. But don't give them training in how to teach their child to use it. So neither the school staff nor the parents know what to do, and it's really not that difficult. And so I wanted to create a roadmap, a practical guide, something that you can pick up and tells you what to do in order and how to make it work. And so I'm hopeful that that Make the Connection will connect parents and therapists. My working title was originally Parents and Practitioners as Partners. Too many P's, which I guess is why my editor changed it. But it's really important to me because it's the one thing that I have found over the years, time after time, is that parents need to know what to do and how to do it to make augmentative communication work. And so it's out there. It's available on Amazon. And I thank you for watching this webinar, and I wish you all the luck in the world. Bye.
Thank you again for joining this webinar. We encourage you to visit the My Special Needs Connection website to take advantage of the many resources we offer, such as the Ask an Advocate feature, our events and professional providers listings, and our Parent Corner where you can connect with other parents. Also, don't forget to sign up for our monthly newsletter so we can keep you up to date on upcoming events and webinars in our community. Please help us to bring others into our community by sharing our information on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, because when it comes to supporting our children, we're better together.